They didn't exist, no names, no dog tags, no country. If captured, their own government would deny their very existence. Immediately, with a casualty rate exceeding 100%, this was the deadliest assignment in American military history. It was a death warrant, operating deep across the fence in Laos and Cambodia. They fought a shadow war that the world was never supposed to see. Every piece of equipment was sterile. No labels, no identifying marks. They were phantom warriors, carrying phantom weapons into the abyss. Their weapons were designed for silent, brutal efficiency. The SOG knife wasn't just a tool. It was an extension of the operator. They didn't fight alone. Indigenous tribesmen, fierce and loyal, formed the backbone of these tiny six-man. Insertion was a gamble. Dropped into hot zones, surrounded by thousands of enemy troops. They were outnumbered before their boots touched mud. Leaving the helicopter meant leaving the known world. Once the rotors faded away, absolute terrifying silence swallowed the six-man whole. Their target was the enemy's main artery. The objective: gather intelligence, capture prisoners, and disrupt. The communication was reduced to hand signals and whispers. One misplaced footstep, one snapped twig, could bring an entire battalion down upon them. To confuse enemy trackers, operators would walk backwards for miles, through the mud, leaving footprints that pointed in the completely wrong direction. They covered their tracks with tear gas powder. When enemy bloodhounds sniffed the trail, their lungs would violently and painfully burn. The chemical burns destroyed the dog's sense of smell, neutralizing the enemy's most effective tool for hunting the ghosts in the dark. Operation Eldest Son was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. SOG operators carried specialized enemy ammunition, packed with highly unstable explosives inside. They would plant these deadly bullets into enemy supply caches or onto fallen soldiers, silently waiting for the lethal trap to spring. When fired, the sabotage bullet would detonate instantly, destroying the weapon and severely wounding or killing the shooter on the spot. The goal wasn't just casualties, it was absolute paranoia. The enemy began to fear their own weapons and their own supply lines. They tapped enemy telegraph lines, recording vital troop movements, while enemy soldiers walked just yards away, completely unaware of the ghosts below. Missions required nerves of steel. They walked through sleeping enemy camps in the pitch black, their hearts pounding violently against their rib cages. Missions lasted for days, without a single minute of sleep. They relied on amphetamines to keep their exhausted bodies functioning under terror. But in the jungle, luck is a fragile commodity. A snapped branch, a shifting wind, and the ghosts were dragged into reality. When compromised, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of enemy troops would converge on the tiny team with terrifying, brutal speed. Operators often carried captured, modified enemy weapons. The sawed-off RPD machine gun offered terrifying, close-range firepower by firing Soviet weapons. They sounded exactly like the enemy in the chaotic darkness of the jungle. This sonic deception bought seconds. To survive, a six-man team had to output the firepower of an entire company. Every weapon was modified for maximum, devastating impact. To save weight, they carried Dutch V-40 mini grenades. They were the size of a golf ball, but packed a lethal fragmentation radius. An operator could carry dozens of them. During an ambush, a six-man team could unleash a continuous, devastating barrage of fiery explosions. When annihilation was imminent, they called the deadliest code word in the military dictionary, a request for all available air support Prairie fire. Their only lifeline was the Cubby Rider, a forward air controller flying circles in a tiny plane, high above the endless green ocean. Cubby Rider orchestrated the chaos. He directed the fighter jets, managed the extraction choppers, and served as the absolute voice of God. To mark the enemy, the Cubby fired Willie Pete rockets. The burning white phosphorus signaled the exact target for the incoming bombers. Then came the Sky Raiders, slow, heavily armored, and capable of dropping devastating ordnance dangerously close to the American team's fragile defensive perimeter. They called it Danger Close, calling an airstrike so near to their own position that the shock waves would make their eardrums violently bleed. Fire authorized any aircraft to drop ordnance on the team's position. It was a calculated, desperate suicide play to survive the night. The wall of fire provided a temporary shield, melting the jungle and buying the team a few Precious minutes to attempt an extraction. Ammunition burned faster than hope. When the magazines ran dry, they resorted to grenades, then to knives, and finally their bare hands. When the ammunition ran out, there was no surrender. Surrender meant brutal torture. They prepared to take as many enemies as they could. But SOG never abandoned its own special bright light. Quick reaction. Forces were launched directly into the meat grinder to save stranded teams. They lived by an unbreakable code: no man left behind, even if it meant carrying a dying brother. Through a hurricane of lead, the extraction pilots were as crazy as the operators. They hovered in a deadly crossfire, taking devastating hits just to pull the ghosts out. When there was no landing zone, they used the Stabo rig, clipping themselves to ropes. They became human cargo dangling in the sky, yanked vertically through the canopy. At 60 miles per hour, they hung by a thread over the enemy, completely exposed to ground fire. Sometimes there was no time to land. Unconscious or wounded, men were literally dragged through the trees, hanging from a single nylon strap. Floor of the extraction chopper told the whole story. Grim painting of sacrifice, written in the blood of the absolute bravest men. The ride back to base was always silent. There was no cheering, just the 1,000-yard stare of men who had visited pure hell. In the shadow of death, race and nationality disappeared. They were bound by a brotherhood forged. Back at base, the debriefings were clinical. Every detail of the nightmare was recorded, analyzed, and then locked away in a classified vault. The casualties were immediately sanitized. Their sacrifices were wiped from the official records, leaving families with unanswered. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological scars were permanent. They carried the heavy weight of the Shadow War in their minds forever. In 1972, MACV-SOG was deactivated. The elite unit was dissolved. The files were sealed. Survival meant blending in completely. They ate local food and used enemy soap to ensure the jungle dogs couldn't distinguish their specific scent. Training was a brutal filter. Only the most resilient and psychologically hardened individuals survived the selection process. For the most dangerous unit alive, they were the eyes of the military. Intelligence gathered by a single 6-man team could change the entire strategy of the mighty Pentagon. Violence was swift and silent. They operated in the shadows, neutralizing threats with lethal precision before the enemy even knew they were there. Every team had a name, and every name became a legend. From Alabama to Idaho, SOG pioneered halo jumping, falling for miles in total darkness before opening their chutes. Just above the trees to avoid enemy radar completely, they owned the night. Using primitive night vision technology, they watched the enemy move in total darkness, gaining a terrifying tactical advantage. Many never returned. The files marked missing in action grew longer every month, leaving behind a legacy of ghosts and unanswered questions. For those captured, the nightmare was only beginning. The Hanoi Hilton held secrets of SOG. From secret bases like Fob 1 and Fubai, they launched missions into the heart of darkness, knowing each departure might be final. The covert tactics forged in the jungles of Vietnam became the blueprint for modern special operations. Every SEAL and Delta operator carries their legacy. 13 medals of honor were awarded to SOG operators. Most were given posthumously. A final silent. They were more than just warriors. They were sons, brothers, and fathers who chose to fight in the shadows so others could live. For decades, their heroism remained unrecognized. They were the most highly decorated in history. They are no longer ghosts. They are legends. Their stories, once untold, now stand. The war is over, the files are open, but the mystery of the jungle remains. They were MSC-SOG, the men who went where others feared to tread, doing the brutal missions that never actually existed in the first place. Their legacy became the absolute foundation of modern warfare. The tactics forged in the blood of the jungle are actively used today. Only a few artifacts remain to prove they ever existed, silent relics of a time when the jungle still holds their dark secrets. If you listen closely to the wind, you might still hear the ghosts walking across the fence. Their compass pointed towards chaos. They walked into the heart of the enemy, guided only by raw courage and unyielding brotherhood. Would you have stepped out of that helicopter, knowing that history would forget your name? But the jungle never ever would. The canopy blocked out the sun, plunging them into a world where only the strongest could navigate. The deadly suffocating darkness. Nature eventually reclaims every battlefield. The earth swallowed their empty magazines, their spilled blood. The rivers they crossed in silence still flow today, carrying the unspoken memories of African men. For those who never made it back, the jungle became their final resting place, an unmarked grave for heroes without a country. As the sun set on the war, the curtain closed on the deadliest special operations unit the world had ever seen. The files were closed, the missions ended, but the legendary stories of MACV-SOG will echo through military history for eternity. If you want to uncover more classified missions and forgotten heroes, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button to join us. Until next time, remember, the absolute most dangerous wars are always the ones they tell you never actually happened in the first place. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay sharp, and always keep hunting for the truth. End of transmission.